What they won't tell you, we will. Come and Take It News.
Welcome to the Come and Take It News podcast. I'm your host, Clint Milby. Mario of Mario Presents is a shining star in the sky that is the Patriot movement of Southern California. Over the past year, Mario, along with the Palmdale Freedom Coalition, were able to organize and pass a city ordinance banning any vaccination mandates for anyone living in the city of Palmdale, effectively shielding its citizens from the federal and state mandates regarding the Covid mRNA shots. We've got a chance to catch up with Mario, who reveals all the details of how they made it happen.
I started working in this arena, just making videos, making blogs as early as 2013. You could even go back as early as 2008 in Facebook, where you were having secret chat rooms with the conservatives because you can't say this stuff publicly or you'd be canceled. But most notably and most recently, I hooked up with a group of people in my community. They call themselves the Palmdale Freedom Coalition. And what we did is we pressured the city to pass an ordinance ensuring our medical privacy through city law or city ordinance, or what we call municipal code. We did our homework, we did our research, we figured out that if a city passes a law, as long as the law doesn't conflict with the state constitution or the federal constitution, that law is perfectly acceptable. And the law that we wrote basically bars any government entity or any business from asking you for your private medical information with regards to the vaccine status, or share that health information to third parties. It was a long fought battle, about 8 months from start to truly finish. At 6 months, they put the ordinance on the table, they pulled it off. It was a big mistake. We basically pressured the city through emails, the letters, the rallies, all the stuff that we've been doing through the mandates. And ultimately we got that law. Well, just about 30 days ago, one of the federal contractors, because we are an aerospace industry, sent out an email to all their employees that everyone has to be vaccinated. One of our members, who is also an employee of one of these contractors, sent a gentle email saying, hey, did you know that the city has this ordinance? The city also has the city code, because we codified it when the city was dragging their feet. They pass a law, but they have to put it into the city code, and they wouldn't do it. So of course we pressured them, and they finally did it. So now this person has a city code and an ordinance to present to their federal contractor and say, hey, I don't know how you're going to deal with this. Your rule about having to vaccinate all of your federal employees and everybody who works for you flies in direct violation of this little tiny local law. And wouldn't you know, 30 days later, when they are legally mandated to respond to that information, they sent out another email reminding all of their employees, because this is a general big contractor, get vaccinated. And at the bottom of it, it said that the location here in Palmdale was excluded. And this is not just one federal contractor, this is 3 federal contractors. So it's huge.
So let's stop for a second. So what happened was, when Biden became president, one of the first things that they did is that they made a federal law that means that any federal contractors have to be vaccinated, or they would potentially lose their contract. Is that correct?
Correct. Anybody who worked on base, anyone who worked, as a machinist, anyone who worked as a painter, because out here in Palmdale, we have what's called Plant 42. It's an aerospace plant. We actually make airplanes. And I have friends from high school. I have family, employed. I have associates who are employed at these, various locations, doing multiple things for the government, whether it be intelligence, whether it be, actual aerospace, whether it be, technology, whatever the case may be, they're working and they're making this stuff for our country. And we saw what was happening with these vaccine mandates. They came to us looking for help. We had a rally outside of several of the locations. We had a rally outside Northrop Grumman. We had a rally outside Lockheed Martin. We had a rally outside of Boeing, because those are the 3 big contractors that employ most of the people in the valley. And whether you agreed or you disagreed with the vaccine's effectiveness, we ultimately said that it's the person's individual right, and it's not an employer's right to tell you what you have to put in your body as a condition of working. If it was, you have to provide this sexual favor for me to keep working here, we'd have a different conversation. But, go ahead and let's put this unknown, untested thing into people's body and then say that's a condition of employment. We said absolutely not. So we knew that we couldn't defeat them on the business level. We couldn't go toe to toe with these contractors. We can't go to toe to toe with the hospital. We can't go toe to toe with some of these people. But what we can do is go toe to toe to the city. And we made the city's 8 months of they couldn't ignore us. Everywhere they looked, we were there. We did rallies where someone drove through our protest, like a car drove through our protest and hit a woman, and I'm still following that case. We have vandalism of our signs, and we would do things like put up a yard sale sign, but it's not a yard sale sign. It's a sign saying, "Hey, pass our ordinance. Hey, check us out. We're the Palmdale Freedom Coalition. Hey, it's my body, it's my choice with regard to the mask or the vax." We were basically, I don't want to say polluting the community, but we were pushing our message into the community away from the internet. We were literally using foam boards on telephone poles and on street lights to wake the community up, because we know where we live. We know that intersection that you're sitting there for an hour or 30 minutes just to get there because you're like this. Well, guess what? We've given you something to look at. And the city couldn't catch us and fine us because it technically falls under the category of a yard sale.
So, so on top of the federal government saying that if you're going to be a contractor for the federal government, you have to have the shot, there's also a state mandate issued by the governor, right, that says that
Correct.
If you're an employee of the state of anywhere in the state of California, you have to be vaccinated. Isn't that correct too?
That is correct. And that's the thing, is our little local law, if they were to try to challenge it, the state and the federal government would have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they have the right to tell a small community what to do with their residents, and they'll never win. They'll never win that case.
So this is the thing. So still, and it's what I'm always telling people, and people they want to talk about politics. They want to get caught up in it. They want to talk about the federal government. They want to talk about the executive branch or the Congress or something like that. But at the end of the day, it's the local governments, your city councils. And I assume this is where you guys worked, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
well,
it's with
yes.
the Palmdale City Council now. What was their reception initially, and how did you convince the city council to vote this through?
That's a fun story. So initially, we knew that we had two councilmen on our side. We had two of them that were receptive to our message. One of them was the mayor, who had who developed myocarditis as a result of the Pope.
Oh wow!
And then another one was another councilwoman who is undergoing cancer treatment, and she had a seizure after receiving the third round of her third booster shot. So these two individuals were already like, no, we're going to put a full stop. If people want to do it, they can. And we totally support this in our community. It was the other three that we had to convince. One of them being very, very opposite us in our opinion, and was always the contrarian. Like, they have a voting history of always voting no when everyone else votes yes, just so they could vote no. And we pushed. We, like I said, went into the community. We did posters. We had meetings every single week about how we're going to strategize. We had communications about how we could present this to the city. We would go to city council meetings and we would tell them, hey, during public comment, hey, can you please put our ordinance on the table? And we started flooding the city with people commenting to pass the ordinance. And then when they put it on the table and they took it off, we went outside. And we made so much noise outside that they had to stop the meeting. And they're like, can you please stop the meeting? We're going to have to call the cops and disturb you for being a raucous crowd. And we're like, we're just sitting here shouting, saying, what we feel. We're not going to hurt anything. We're not being violent. But just because you can't conduct your business anymore because we're loud outside doesn't make us the bad guys.
So give us a timeline here. When did you put it to the city council that they needed to bring this to a vote, or that they needed to, at least bring it onto the table?
We put it to their table in September, October. We delivered it to the city along with 2,500 signatures.
This past September 2022? Mm-hmm. But you guys have
no, not 2022. 2021.
So this has been going on for longer than a year almost then.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, no, it's already done. Like we won our battle back in April, because by May it was codified.
So, but from
during the height of the
October.
pandemic, October 2021, we delivered our ordinance to the city, that our request to put it on the docket so they could pass it and codify it, along with 2,500 signatures from stakeholders around the community, in the community and around the area. Because I went out into my local community, I went out into the rallies, and I said, "Hey, do you want to help me? Because you're a stakeholder, Clint. If you came up to Palmdale and spent money, God forbid that restaurant asked you for your vaccination status,
Right.
you would be considered a stakeholder. So we
Right.
wanted you to also be part of this. So we went everywhere. We didn't limit ourselves to just the people in the city. We limited to everybody who could be affected by the city. And the city was shocked. They kept pushing it to the next session. They kept pushing it to the next session, pushing it to the next session. And then just before the Supreme Court made their ruling with regards to the COVID vaccinations in OSHA, do you remember that? We
kind of, yeah.
we had it on the docket as well, and the city council chose to remove it, basing their removal on the fact that, oh, well, let's just wait to see what the Supreme Court said. We just want to make sure that we're going to be on.
That, yeah.
So that's when the crowd lost their minds, and we went outside and we screamed as loud as we could. We set off all the car alarms. We had, horns. It was like a 9-alarm fire outside. And they were like, we can't get our work done. We can't hear ourselves with everything going on outside. Through double doors and walls, they could hear us. Like, we literally, like the biblical story, we sounded the horn, Jericho, and we shut them down. And they finally had to be like, okay, fine, we understand, we get your point, blah, blah, blah. And so the next session, we waited to see if they were going to put it on the docket. And
now, and just for timeline purposes, what is this, like February?
This is now February. This is now February. And it's freezing cold. I live up in Palmdale. It gets like literally 32 degrees Fahrenheit. It's freezing out there.
It's a high desert.
The wind is howling. Yes, the high desert. Then the wind is howling at 10 miles an hour. So it bites. It's cold. And we're out there. I went and bought space heaters. We got a generator so people could huddle and stay warm. I mean, we literally put our hearts and souls into this. And so then by March, I came up with the idea of filibustering the city. And everyone's like, how are you going to do that? Like, what do you do? Like, how do you do that? And I said, well, I know we've been talking, and every time that we talk, it seems they either cut our time down or limit the amount of speakers. And they said, yeah. I said, well, what happens when you go in and you sign up to speak on every single agenda item? Whether they're spending $500 to change a street sign, whether they're considering the adoption of a new lawyer, whether they're, considering this, you can have a right to speak on that item, and you get 3 minutes on that item.
Mm-hmm.
They can't limit that. So, and even if they did, because of the number of speakers, well, then guess what? Now you got 2 minutes on that item. But guess what? Now I've got this 2 minutes over here on this item. And then I've got this 2 minutes over here on this item. And this and they can't cut you down to 30 seconds. It's just feasibly impossible. They have to give you at least a minimum amount of a time, and everyone has to have the same amount of time. So why not flood them with speakers on every single thing? And I pointed the speakers and I said, instead of talking about the item on the docket, redirect the conversation back to it, allude them back. Why are you spending $500 on a street sign when my ordinance is free? Is this lawyer that you're considering getting a contract with going to be supportive of my ordinance? Because my ordinance is really protecting the people and blah, 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 blah. And I've wasted all your time. It was 11 o'clock and you haven't got out of general comments. And they're like, we haven't done anything. Da-da-da. Well, maybe next time you should put our ordinance on. And the city council was so frustrated, they threw their hands up like, what do you want? What do you want? And,
just do it.
At that point, we knew we had you. We're in control, not you. And
but it took time, though, right? This is not something that happened like all the.
It was 8 months.
And at some point in time, I mean, during 8 months and everything that's going on in the world, and people have lives, and they got to go to work, and they got kids or whatever, and everything like that. Surely, I mean, how did you encourage your base? Because to make it so that they didn't quit or fall out.
Well,
because there must have seemed like that there was no path to victory on all this. They're stonewalling you completely. I mean, so what did you do? How did you do that?
So what we did was we started a newspaper. I'll be right back. Hold on.
Oh, okay. So he's going to go get the newspaper?
Yes.
So
Yes,
you
I
guys
am
actually
actually.
you printed the newspaper? Is that what it was?
That is exactly what that is. What
Wow.
we did was we started with a single piece of paper, front and back, um, just basically giving the um, it's just one letter size piece of paper. We called it free flow communique. I don't have a copy of it here anymore. I wish I did. I could print one out, but this is like too long.
Mhm.
Um, so it was just one piece of paper, front and back. We use Google Docs to communicate and actually work on this together. I would write an article, someone else would write an article. We would share stories from the community, a story about a parent whose child was either injured by the vaccine, a person who was injured by a vaccine and won a case. Her name is Diana Broussard. She lives in our community. She took a meningitis shot at the request and the encouragement of the prison out here, and it left her paralyzed. And she ended up suing the what is it, Workman's Comp. She sued Workman's Comp and she won. She's the first person in California to win a Workman's Comp claim because the vaccine injured her, or a vaccine, not the vaccine, but a vaccine injured her. So stories like that, stories about what was happening in the community, how we could do that. We produced that one piece of paper every 2 weeks. Okay, I was captain of information, so we would gather these stories, put them together, and then print them out, and we would just hand them out because everybody can get access to a printer to just make it one piece of paper. That has now since turned into an actual newspaper.
Oh wow, look at that.
Okay, that we produce ourselves with ads, ban on vaccine passports.
Wow.
So we got out into the community. Again, it was putting up posters because it seems silly and contrite to be like, why am I going to put up a poster on the telephone pole? But believe it or not, you're getting people's attention. That we all know the media is going to suppress us. We all know that Mockingbird is only telling one part of the story.
No, and go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that us from a previous generation that didn't include the internet, how did we find out about parties? There were flyers, there were telephone calls, there were the little flyers that had the little telephone numbers that you would pull down, if you wanted to rent a room or something like that.
Right.
We were able to get out a lot of information without having to use like the internet because it literally did not exist. So
and you make it fun. You make it fun for people. We went out to the local brewery that was supportive of us. We found local businesses that were supportive of our message, and we would go, okay, hey, brewery, would you mind if we took a couple tables on a Thursday and made some signs? And they went, that's fine, long as you buy something. We're like,
yeah,
done. Pizza and beer? Ha! So we would sit there, we'd order pizza, we'd order beer, and we'd be out there with our little foam board signs and markers at this public brewery, and people get excited. They're inquisitive by nature. They want to know what's going on.
What are you doing?
Like, what are you doing? Exactly. And we say, making posters. And then they read the posters about, stop masking my kids, let me make my own choices for my body, pass ordinance 1577. And they'd ask questions. What are we guys doing? Oh my God, yes. And we always had business cards for the website, for the main group here. Join us on at 6 o'clock. So we were always getting fresh faces. Some people drifted in, some people drifted out, but ultimately a core group was created.
About how many were in that core group?
About 100 of us.
100. Well, that's awesome. So this is my question though, is like, so anybody with the anti-vax stance or an anti-COVID vax stance has been demonized from the top down, from the president to the media talk show host, and it seems to have permeated society to the point where people have this preconceived notion that anybody that questions it is insane. So how did you overcome that? Because once people saw, he's making a poster about the vax, he must be a lunatic. Don't you know that you're going to die if you don't take it? What did you get opposition for?
Oh, absolutely.
Like I said, what was that like?
We had a man literally get out of his car at an intersection to scream at us. And for me, as an activist being on the ground for a long time, that's like blood in the water for a shark. I'm walking across the street in my stilettos and my flag, and I see this person, and I'm like, oh, And I ran to him and I'm like, honey, no, you don't get to tell me what to do with my body. It's my body, my choice. How can you be, pro putting something into my body without my consent? And he took a swing at me. He took a swing at me, knocked my speaker out of my hand. I pick it up. I stand, I get up from picking it up. Another even older gentleman who is on our side comes rushing over, clocks the dude and goes, "Don't touch him. You leave him alone." And basically pushes him back into his car. So now the old man, he must have been about 80 years old. And he's like, "Are you okay?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm fine today." So we both walk back over to the corner. The assailant drives off only to make a U-turn and then make a wide left, allegedly losing control. I'm not sure if he lost control or if he was deliberate, but he squealed his tires and raced up and he hit somebody who was in our protest trying to be like, "Hey, he's da 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 da." So we have the actual evidence of them actually acting crazy. We have pictures of the signs that they destroy. We have videos of them destroying our signs. So what we do is we intentionally goad them into destroying our signs. The ones up high, we got to have high hanging fruit. That makes it more difficult for them. And that requires a city, okay? Because that trolls the city and frustrates the city because they're spending money. The other ones is we put low hanging fruit. We did regular poster boards, just, floppy. I call them floppy poster board, just regular paper poster board. As you know, or if you don't know, the White Rose produces all these really cool stickers that kind of help get the message out. For those of you guys who don't know, White Rose is established in 1942 Germany when the Nazis were saying all this horrible stuff about the Jews, and the White Rose said, no. We at least need to treat them like human beings. They're not, they're not these, disease-ridden pestilence that, requires extermination. Like Hitler says, we need to wake the world up, and that's what they did.
The White Rose was actually made up of former Hitler youth. One of them was actually a soldier, and they went to the colleges because they were college age and were giving all these leaflets out that gave information about what was actually happening to Jews in Poland.
Correct.
Because the soldiers had seen it firsthand.
Correct.
And most of them, not all of them, but most of them were beheaded. They were charged with treason and beheaded for their actions.
So, but their message carries on, and
Right.
so I've connected with the White Rose. So I have my PFC people. That's our acronym, Palmdale Freedom Coalition. I have my PFC people. Literally every week, I'm handing out stickers. Here, take the stickers. Take the stickers. Take the stickers. I'm giving out thousands of stickers a week to this group, who then goes out into the community and just puts them everywhere. So then what we would do is when we would do our signs, we would do our high hanging fruit on the light poles and the telephone poles, and then on the cable boxes, which are low hanging fruit, we would put the floppy signs, okay, because those you just tape up like you would like a sign, party sign, whatever. But underneath the sign, I put White Rose stickers, because if you're so mad that you have to tear my sign down, I'm going to trigger you a second time, because now there's going to be White Rose stickers underneath to really trigger you, and you're going to either waste your time or you're just going to be really, really mad and walk off. So I take great joy in just knowing that I've elicited these emotions. So when these people throw coffee on our signs, when they try to jump up and slash our signs down, it gives me joy, because you know what? It resolves me to do it again and find another way of figuring out a way to get in here, because our message is important. There's a lot of people who agree with our message, and it's a what is it? No holds barred.
It's a life or death issue, right? I mean, this is, people are actually dying off of this shot. So, it's not just about like, I like pink and you like blue. It's a little bit different than that. There's actually people's lives at stake, and especially now that we're talking about the kids, and because it's being pushed by the state, then, you either take it lying down or you get up and fight. And, one of the things is, I've been to protests where people say, oh, you shouldn't try to make them mad. But you know what? Anger is the first stage in acceptance. When we look at I forget exactly how it was developed, but it's anger, frustration, and then finally you get to a point of like, a resolution or acceptance, right? And you have to have that anger. That is what, because they war with that issue in their mind, and that allows, them to essentially educate themselves on what's going on just by examining what the thing is that they're fighting against.
Exactly. And I mean, almost immediately when we put our first signs up, in the community. They were vandalized, they were destroyed, and I ran or they were altered, because that was the other thing they would do. They would alter our signs. So I would take them back and I would run to the big group, because we met every single Wednesday at a local business. And I would say, look at your signs. Look what they did to your signs. And they're like, oh my God, that's terrible. And I go, this is why we need you guys to join the sign team. You need to make more signs, because you've elicited an emotion from them. Let's keep going.
So,
and they go, oh.
No, go ahead.
No, that's it. It's encouragement, And once the parents got into it, the kids got into it, the community got into it, and people would call us. People love our signs. Then we would see the comments on Nextdoor. So then we would make signs for the people commenting on Nextdoor. We're doing this for you too, Dennis.
So, let me ask you in regards to that, how did you? So you had the one city council person that had myocarditis. Did he then become a champion for the cause? And how did you convince the other city council people to jump on board? I know you said you had the contrarian, but was there any taking these people to dinner, or how did that work out?
No. If anything, it was literally pressure. Every single week we were there discussing the vaccine. We were discussing the freedom, the bodily autonomy. We were discussing the bullying that we were seeing with regards to the vaccination in Los Angeles, because people were being bullied. People were being treated very, very poorly simply because they didn't have a vaccination. And we would use those examples at the city council. So we used everything that we could. We had an entire team, and we called it a research team or a legal team. All they did was research, pull up the VAERS website, pull up, articles, so that they could get it to the group, so that the group had the information, so that we could articulate our points. If you really felt passionately about the side effects, then that's what you talked about. If you really felt passionately about the spiritual angle, go with that one. If you felt very passionately about the scientific angle, we had, believe it or not, we have an immunologist in our group. He actually was an immunologist at Children's Hospital.
Oh, that's huge.
And so he was up there speaking. He's like, I was an immunologist for 30 years at Children's Hospital. I know what I'm talking about when I talk about microbes and the immune system. And I'm telling you right now, these are the reasons why you need to pass our ordinance. So it was literally just, I don't want to say browbeating, but it was browbeating. Children were going up there speaking about their experiences at school because of the vaccine and the masks. And you basically didn't leave any stone unturned. I even went so far as to speak in Spanish, because I do speak Spanish. I speak fluent Spanish.
That. Yeah, I saw that.
And I deliberately spoke Spanish to them, knowing that several of the council members don't speak Spanish. And they were confused and didn't understand why I would do that. And then at the end, the lawyer goes, and now you get 3 minutes to say your speech in English. And I went, thank you. And I exactly translated the speech word for word. And they were like, oh my God, he's found another way to solve for time. And I'm like, yeah, I did.
So did you? So it got codified into law, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when did that happen? Was that recently or what?
That was April, I believe it was April 16th, 2022. It was passed by a vote of 5-0.
The ordinance was put into place in April of 2022. And then you just recently found out that one of the aerospace companies in the area had released a notice to employees about it?
Yeah, I just recently found out. It was within the last 2 weeks that I was privy to this information. Apparently it's, it's big news. I'm super excited. I mean, to defeat a federal contractor like that with a little tiny law is ginormous.
No, we're not talking about Joe's carburetor shop either. We're talking about one of the major aerospace companies, that is global. We all know
all
who they
three.
Are. All three of them.
All three, because so I have a newspaper.
But we can say it though, right? It's Lockheed, it's Boeing,
and Northrop Grumman.
Northrop.
We call it Plant 42.
And they all work at the same plant. Essentially, all the three companies are there at the same plant.
They're all in the same government plant. Yeah,
wow.
It's the government-owned Plant 42. I found out from one of the PFC members who I'm connected with. I then verified it.
What's PFC?
Palmdale Freedom Coalition. I'm
Oh, okay,
sorry.
okay.
That's our acronym for each other.
Hmm.
From one of the Palmdale Freedom Coalition members who works there, I found out that this email had gone out and that there was a little blurb at the bottom. And I was like, really? I was like, that's so cool. And then I called a friend of mine from high school who also works on base. And I said, hey, by the way, you work on base, don't you? Did you get an email? Did it have a little red thing? And they said, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I was like, okay, just checking. You're welcome. I'll see you later. And then as I retold the story to the General Palmdale Freedom Coalition at our regular Wednesday meeting this last week, another employee from one of the third companies came up to me and said, oh, by the way, it's not just this one, it's this one and this one. And he confirmed that it's all of them at this plant. None of them are going to force the vaccine.
So this is in Palmdale. So, I mean, these companies, obviously, they have sites all over the world.
All over the world.
But in Palmdale, if you're fortunate enough to work there, you're exempt and they can't hassle you about it.
Correct. So I'm just waiting for the news to really start coming out, because what's going to happen is all the other locations don't have an ordinance, and they're going to wonder, why does this, what makes Plant 42 so special? What did they do?
Yeah, because I don't want to take the vaccine, so how come they get to and I don't?
And how come they don't get to an album I don't? And how can I get there?
Right. That would be the first thing if I was an employee there, because I hate being treated unfairly. So I'll be just like, hey, why do they get to and I don't? And this is going to cause a headache for their HR, I would think.
I would certainly think so. Because then, I mean, at this point, we might even be able to establish precedent as somebody who was coerced into it.
So here's the deal, is that if you are in a community, you or in a blue state, in a blue city or blue county, where they have made the vaccine a requirement for employment, as a city, you can strong arm your city council into making an ordinance exempting the citizens of that city. And that's the path to victory here. It's not going and strong arming congressmen and writing them and stuff like that. I guess you could do that too, but it's about your local level. That's where this has to happen. That's where the fight is.
The fight is absolutely at the local level. I'm a wholehearted, firm believer that it was the passion of the local community that really, really came through. Like, once we figured out the solution, the problem and the solution, which was these federal mandates, the solution was a local law, because now the federal government has to challenge the local law. I don't care how much money you have. I don't care if you are the federal government. The federal government can't come into a community and say, hi, you can't drink past midnight.
Right. Right. And I mean, and again, these are mandates. These are not laws that we're talking about. So,
and now we have a law that trumps their mandate.
It's amazing to me, because that you guys never lost hope. I mean, this didn't happen overnight. I mean, and you had to rally everybody and keep people going. Like I said, people have lives, and they're like, I just don't want to.
If everyone brings just this much, once we put it together, there's nothing we're unstoppable. And what happens is, once they start seeing little victories, they're willing to put in, instead of this much, they're willing to put this much, and then this much, and then this much. And before you know it, they're putting so much into it. And they're like, God, how did we get here? I never thought I'd be an activist. I know, me neither. But here we are, and we save lives, and we save jobs, and we're saving a community.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. So if you could talk to, just there's a little town out there somewhere, there's somebody living in a town and they're facing the same things, what should they do? They should get involved in the city council. One of the things that I've noticed is talking to relatives and friends and stuff like that, they have no clue who their mayor is. They have no clue who the people on the city council are. They have no clue on who their school board is. And then all of a sudden, all these radical things start happening, and that's how they're implemented, is through those channels. So if you could tell somebody something, what would you tell them, when you're looking at it from the outset of this victory that you've had?
Um, what I would tell them is number one, don't lose faith and don't lose hope because those are the most important things that you are going to need. Number two, um, I would say download Public Square. It's not to make it a commercial for Public Square, but Public Square has a function called the Fountain, and the Fountain actually gives you your school board and your city council right there in the application, so you have that knowledge at your fingertips. Okay. Number three, get connected with a local group. Okay, that is fighting for freedom. I know they're hard to find, especially right now in this age of suppression. If you don't have one, start one. What we did with no money. We had zero funding. You know how most groups like, oh, you got to pay $3 every time you come to the meeting.
Oh yeah,
Oh, hey,
absolutely.
you want to be part of our group? You got to pay $60 membership every single year annually. No, we didn't want any of that, and that was something we prided ourselves on. We didn't ask for your money, and when people say, how can we donate? How can we give? How can we give? Is there some? I don't have the time. I would love to be involved, but I can't be, seen. How can I help? Where can I donate? You know what we would say? We would love to have your money. It's such a wonderful thing. However, that's not what we're here for. We'd love to have you participating, maybe making a sign. But if you can't make a sign, there are things that we can use, like
Supplies.
poster boards, markers, paper, because we're printing paper. We're using reams of paper for our stuff. Um, that kind of stuff. That is absolutely welcome. Our paper was launched. The first edition was launched with literally passing around the hat like at church.
Has there been any pushback from any of this? Have you seen any pushback from, or have you heard of anything like someone's going to try to override you on some of this? Because
Not that we've heard. If anything, we do see some resistance, like the hospital is actually resisting our ordinance. The sheriff's department, because they're part of LA County, they're still trying to kind of use our ordinance. They are still forcing them to test. So we're trying to push back at the sheriff's department. But most other businesses, they all kind of went, oh, no, he's right. They're right. We don't want to do this. But the big one was the federal contractors that recently said, you know what, they're right. We have to honor these people's little local law.
has there been any harassment that you've experienced that seems to be extra, like, I don't know, just random people, or maybe even like Antifa or stuff like that, that have like harassed you or targeted you for this specific issue?
No, not for this specific issue. For this specific issue, they have pretty much left us alone. It's interesting. I know a lot of the characters, even in my own community up in Palmdale. So when they show up, I'm like, "Hi, I know who you are," and I point them out because they don't like that. They don't like being, identified,
Outed.
especially outed, especially. They hide behind the anti-fascist nomer, and when you say, that's who you are, and they go, no, 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 I'm not, and I go, yes, you are. Let's take pictures of you. Let's take pictures together, and they all of a sudden they run. They don't want to be part of the thing. So they know that I know who they are, so they know to stay away from me and my group.
So if you were talking to somebody that lives in a town right now, if you could give them just like, some quick advice, what would you tell them to do if they're trying to stop these mandates in their town?
Number one, join or start a coalition of freedom fighters. Okay. You don't need money to do that. You just need a place to meet and the heart to meet every single week. That's what you do. Organization is key. We have teams. We have an information team, a sign team, a research team, a council team, and a faith team. Because our prayer warriors can't be forgotten. Our prayer warriors were on the ground praying for our spaces. So if we had a rally, they had already prayed that. They Jericho walked the space long before we ever touched the ground. Okay. So that's why we attribute the fact that the woman who got hit by a car was not seriously injured. She was hit by a car and thrown into those little wagons. She was thrown into a wagon. Okay. She moved a child out of the way and got hit by a car, thrown into a wagon, and she suffered minor injuries to her shoulder.
At the end of the day, this is a spiritual battle, right?
Oh, absolutely. It is a spiritual battle. And we thank God for our prayer warriors. They're just as important as the people like me who go out there in their heels and their flags, or who make signs. Every piece is important. You need those little 5 teams to kind of put everything together. The information gathers and disseminate the information. Research is researching so that they can give the information over to the information team because that's their function. The sign team is out there getting your message out beyond the internet, beyond the reaches of multimedia. Okay. The council team is on the ground at the council meetings, talking, listening. What are they saying? Recording, reviewing those council meetings. So then we can all go back to the information team, go back into the research team, and then the faith team prays for our success over all these things. These 5 teams did literally pushed the city into getting this ordinance, and everybody should be forming these teams. And the reason we form them is because you can play to everyone's strengths. You have your writers, you have your researchers, you have your artists, you have the interested parties who just want to sit and just watch. That everybody has a place. We just need to find that little spark and nurture that spark till it becomes a really big flame, and then they go, wow, look what you guys did. Well, look at, it's not me, look at this big bright light. It's not just my light, it's all of us. You can contact me on any of my platforms. I'm Mario Presents on all platforms, sometimes in platforms. You can always find me at www.mariopresents.com. And then if you want to find out about the Palmdale Freedom Coalition and the work that we've done as a community, you can go to www.palmdalefreedomcoalition.com. Thank you so much, Clint.
What they won't tell you, we will.